The prison gate slammed shut behind Cynthia. She flinched, not because of the sound, because it made everything real. For 5 years, she'd survived on one promise. Kelvin would be waiting. Every lonely night. Every humiliating prison inspection. Every birthday spent staring at concrete walls. She endured it all, because she believed someone would be waiting on the other side. Now she stood outside with a small bag and a heart full of hope. Freedom felt strange. The air smelled different. The world looked different. But none of that mattered. She was finally going home. The bus ride felt endless. Her hands trembled the entire way. She imagined Kelvin's smile, his voice, his arms around her. She imagined rebuilding the life they had lost. 5 years had been stolen from them, but together, they would find a way forward. They always had. By late afternoon, she stood in front of the house, her house. At least it used to be. The sight brought tears to her eyes. The same driveway, the same garden, the same porch. For a moment, she simply stood there smiling. Then she walked to the door and knocked. Her heart pounded. Footsteps approached. Excitement surged through her. The door opened, and her world shattered. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. It helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. Now let's get back to Cynthia's story. A woman stood there, not a visitor, not a relative. A woman who clearly lived in the house. A woman stood there, not a visitor, not a relative. A woman who clearly lived in the house. She looked confused. "Can I help you?" Cynthia couldn't speak. Her mind refused to process what she was seeing. Then a little boy appeared beside the woman. 4 years old, maybe 5. He looked up curiously. Before Cynthia could make sense of it, another voice called from inside. "Who's at the door?" The voice she'd waited 5 years to hear. "Kelvin." He stepped into view. Then froze. The color drained from his face. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. The little boy looked up at him. "Daddy?" The word hit Cynthia like a punch. "Daddy." Kelvin closed his eyes for a moment, as if he wished he could disappear. Cynthia stared at him, waiting, praying for an explanation. But the explanation was standing right in front of her. The woman, the child, the life he'd built without her. The woman slowly looked between them. Then understanding filled her eyes. Not confusion. Understanding. Which meant she already knew who Cynthia was. The realization made Cynthia feel sick. Finally, the woman stepped aside. "Come inside." The invitation felt strange, almost cruel. But Cynthia walked in. The house looked familiar and completely foreign. Family photos covered the walls. Kelvin, the woman, the little boy, birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings, a family, a complete family, one that didn't include her. Then she saw the wedding photo. Her legs nearly gave out. Kelvin stood beside another woman, smiling in front of a wedding cake. Cynthia couldn't look away. Finally, she turned to him. "When?" Silence. "When?" Kelvin lowered his eyes. The woman picked up the child. "I'm taking Joshua upstairs." A few moments later, they were alone. Cynthia asked again. "When?" Kelvin swallowed. 3 years ago." The room spun. 3 years. He'd remarried while she was still in prison, while she was counting days, still defending him, still believing in him. Tears filled her eyes. "You promised me." Kelvin closed his eyes. "I know. I went to prison for you. I know. I lost everything." His voice cracked. "I know." The words exploded from her. "You promised me." For the first time, Kelvin began to cry. But Cynthia didn't care. Not anymore. Every memory felt poisoned. Every promise, every sacrifice, everything. Do you love her? The question escaped before she could stop it. Kelvin hesitated. That hesitation was answer enough. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. You do. Cynthia, you love her. It's not that simple. Then explain it. He couldn't, because there was no explanation. No excuse, no justification, nothing that could undo what he'd done. That night, Cynthia sat alone in a guest room. A guest, in the house she once owned. The thought made her laugh and cry at the same time. Hours later, there was a knock. The door opened. The woman stepped inside. She looked uncomfortable. "My name is Vanessa." Cynthia said nothing. Vanessa sat carefully on the edge of a chair. "I know who you are." Of course she did. Everyone probably knew. The wife who went to prison. The wife who disappeared. The wife who came back too late. Vanessa looked down. "I didn't know the truth at first." That got Cynthia's attention. Vanessa continued quietly. "Kelvin told me you had separated." The pain deepened. Separated, not imprisoned, not sacrificed. Separated. He lied. Vanessa nodded. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Then Vanessa said something unexpected. "He didn't tell me everything until after we were married." For the first time, Cynthia saw genuine regret in her eyes. But it changed nothing. The damage had already been done. The following weeks were brutal. She searched for work. Nothing. She searched for an apartment. Nothing. Every application ended the same way. 5 years in prison. Rejected. 5 years in prison. Rejected. 5 years in prison. Rejected. The little money she had disappeared quickly. Soon, reality became impossible to ignore. She had nowhere else to go. One evening, she sat across from Kelvin at the kitchen table. The silence between them felt endless. Finally, she spoke. "I need more time." Kelvin nodded. "Okay." That was it. No discussion. No emotion. Just okay. Months became years. Cynthia became something she never imagined. Not a wife. Not quite a guest. Something in between. She cooked. Cleaned. Ran errands. Helped wherever she could. And slowly, Joshua grew attached to her. To him, she wasn't a complicated piece of family history. She was simply Cynthia. Someone who listened. Someone who cared. Someone who always showed up. Unfortunately, Vanessa noticed. At first, it was small comments. Then criticism. Then cold silences. Nothing dramatic. Just constant reminders that Cynthia didn't belong. But the hardest part wasn't Vanessa. It was Kelvin. Because Kelvin never defended her. Never spoke up. Never protected her. The man she'd sacrificed everything for sat silently while pieces of her broke. Then one rainy evening, she finally asked the question that had haunted her for years. "Why did you stop visiting me?" Kelvin froze. The room fell silent. Heavy. Painful. Unavoidable. Kelvin. His eyes remained fixed on the table. Finally he whispered, "Because every time I saw you," his voice cracked, "I hated myself." Cynthia stared at him. Stunned. For years, she'd imagined hundreds of explanations. But never that one. Not guilt, not shame, not cowardice. Yet somehow, that answer hurt the most, because it meant he hadn't forgotten her. He had simply chosen himself, and that realization would haunt her for years to come. The years ahead would test Cynthia in ways prison never had, because surviving betrayal was harder than surviving prison. And the worst was still to come. The years passed slowly, painfully slowly. Not because something dramatic happened every day, but because every day felt exactly the same. Every morning, Cynthia woke up in a house that used to be hers. Every morning she saw the man she had sacrificed everything for. And every morning she reminded herself not to expect anything. Hope was exhausting, and she was tired, very tired. So she focused on surviving. Nothing more. Joshua helped. The little boy grew quickly. Children had a way of loving people without conditions, without history, without judgment. To Joshua, Cynthia was simply family. One afternoon he burst into the kitchen waving a certificate. "Auntie," she smiled. "What happened?" "I came first in my class." His excitement was contagious. Cynthia looked at the paper and laughed. "That's incredible." Joshua grinned. "Will you get me ice cream? We'll talk about that." He threw his arms around her. At that exact moment, Vanessa walked in. The smile on her face faded. Not completely, just enough. Enough for Cynthia to notice. Enough to understand. That night, another argument erupted behind closed doors. The walls weren't thick enough to hide it. "He's becoming too attached." Vanessa sounded frustrated. "He's a child," Kelvin replied. "She's not his mother." Silence followed. Then Kelvin sighed. "What exactly do you want me to do?" Cynthia walked away before she heard the answer. There was no point listening. She already knew how Vanessa felt. And deep down, she understood. The situation wasn't fair to anyone, least of all Joshua. Months later, life changed again. It started with a cough. A simple cough. Nothing alarming, nothing unusual. At first, nobody paid much attention. But the cough stayed. Weeks passed. Then came the fatigue, the headaches, the weight loss. One evening, Kelvin nearly collapsed in the living room. Vanessa rushed forward. "Kelvin!" He grabbed the back of a chair. "I'm fine." "You are not fine. I'm just tired." Vanessa looked terrified. "No, something is wrong." For the first time, Cynthia agreed. Something wasn't right. Doctor appointments followed. Then tests. Then more tests. Every visit seemed to create more questions than answers. The uncertainty affected everyone, especially Kelvin. The stronger he tried to appear, the more frightened he looked. One afternoon, Cynthia found him alone with a stack of medical reports. His hands were trembling. She sat beside him. "What did they say?" Kelvin laughed bitterly. "They don't know yet. That's not necessarily bad. Maybe." But neither of them sounded convinced. Weeks later, the diagnosis finally came, and it wasn't good. The doctor explained the treatment, the risks, the complications, the possibility that things could become very serious. By the end of the appointment, Vanessa was crying. Kelvin looked completely numb. The drive home passed in silence. Life had changed again, and this time there was no pretending otherwise. Treatment began immediately. The side effects were brutal. Kelvin grew thinner, weaker, exhausted. Some days, he barely left his bed. Other days, he couldn't finish a meal. Watching him decline was painful, even for Cynthia, because despite everything, she still remembered the young man who once made her believe she mattered, the man she had loved. For a while, Vanessa stood firmly beside him. She attended appointments, managed medications, handled paperwork, stayed awake through difficult nights. But illness has a way of exposing cracks. The months dragged on. The stress grew heavier. The bills grew larger. The business began struggling. One lost contract became several. Several became many. Money became a constant source of tension. Arguments filled the house. Fear followed everyone from room to room. And slowly, Vanessa began to change. Her patience shortened. Her compassion faded. Her frustration surfaced more often. One evening, she snapped at Kelvin over something insignificant. A missed medication. A forgotten appointment. Something small. The silence afterward was devastating, because everyone knew the argument wasn't really about that. It was about fear, exhaustion, and the possibility that life might never return to normal. That night, Cynthia lay awake listening to rain strike the windows. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Something was coming. Something bad. And unfortunately, she was right. The collapse happened on a Tuesday morning. One moment, Kelvin was walking out of the kitchen. The next, he was on the floor. The sound echoed through the house. Joshua screamed. Vanessa froze. Cynthia dropped the plate she was carrying. It shattered across the floor. Kelvin! No response. For one terrifying second, nobody moved. Then Cynthia sprang into action. Call an ambulance. Vanessa finally grabbed her phone. Joshua stood crying. Cynthia knelt beside Kelvin. His breathing was shallow. His skin was pale. Far too pale. Fear gripped her chest. Not anger. Not resentment. Fear. The ambulance arrived within minutes. It felt like hours. The hospital became their entire world. Doctors. Machines. Tests. Long hallways. Longer nights. The prognosis wasn't encouraging. Nobody said the worst out loud, but everyone heard it anyway. Several difficult weeks followed. Kelvin's condition deteriorated. Treatment costs mounted. The business continued bleeding money. Stress consumed what remained of the household. Then one morning, Vanessa disappeared. At first, nobody panicked. People needed breaks. People needed space. But evening came. She didn't return. The next day passed. Nothing. Then Kelvin's accountant called. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. By the end, Cynthia felt ice spread through her veins. Several company accounts had been emptied. A huge amount of money was gone. Vanessa had access to everything. The truth hit with brutal force. She hadn't taken a break. She had left. For good. When Kelvin learned what happened, he simply stared at the ceiling. No shouting, no tears, no anger, just silence. The kind of silence that comes when someone no longer has the strength to be surprised. Joshua cried for hours. Cynthia held him until he finally fell asleep. Later, she sat alone in the hospital chapel, exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. 5 years in prison, years of humiliation, years of heartbreak, and somehow she was still here. Still caring, still showing up. She wasn't sure whether that made her strong or foolish. The next morning, a nurse approached her. "He's asking for you." Cynthia frowned. "For me?" The nurse nodded. "He won't stop asking." A strange feeling settled in her stomach. Slowly, she walked toward Kelvin's room. He looked fragile, far more fragile than she had ever seen him. The confident young man she once knew felt like a distant memory. When he saw her, tears filled his eyes. "Cynthia." She stopped near the doorway. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Kelvin whispered, "I'm sorry." The words sounded broken. Real. Painful, but still years too late. And for the first time, Cynthia realized something. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was finally facing the truth. The truth he had spent years running from. By the time Kelvin returned home, he was a different man. Life had humbled him. The illness had stripped away everything he used to hide behind. The pride, the excuses, the selfishness. For the first time in years, he was forced to sit alone with the damage he had caused. And the truth was unbearable. Cynthia expected the change to disappear after a few weeks. People made promises when they were scared. People made promises when they thought they might die. She had learned that long ago. But this time was different. Weeks passed. Then months. And Kelvin kept showing up. Not with grand speeches, not with dramatic declarations, with actions. Small ones. Consistent ones. When Joshua needed help with schoolwork, Kelvin was there. When bills needed sorting, Kelvin handled them. When Cynthia spoke, he listened. Really listened. For years, she had begged to be seen. Now he finally saw her. One afternoon, she found him sitting alone on the back porch. An old photo album rested on his lap. He stared at a picture of them taken years earlier. Before prison. Before betrayal. Before everything fell apart. "We looked happy," Cynthia said quietly. Kelvin nodded. "We were." For a moment, neither spoke. Then he looked down at the photograph. "You know what hurts the most?" Cynthia remained silent. "I used to look at these pictures and feel sorry for myself." His voice cracked. "Now I look at them and realize you were the one who paid the price for my mistakes." The honesty caught her off guard. Kelvin wiped his eyes. "You loved me more than anyone ever should have." His gaze stayed fixed on the picture. "And when it mattered most, I abandoned you." For once, there was no excuse. No explanation. No attempt to soften the truth. Only regret. Real regret. The months continued. Joshua became the bridge neither of them expected. The boy adored Cynthia. He sought her advice, shared his school stories with her, asked her to attend every event. One evening after dinner, Joshua looked up from his homework. "Auntie Cynthia?" "Yes?" "Are you happy here?" The question surprised her. She smiled softly. "Why do you ask?" Joshua shrugged. "You always make everybody else happy." His innocent words lingered long after he left the room. That night, Cynthia lay awake staring at the ceiling. Because she couldn't remember the last time someone had asked what she wanted. What made her happy? What kind of life she dreamed about? For years, she had lived for other people. Her mother, Kelvin, the business. Even Joshua. She had spent so much time saving everyone else that she had forgotten herself. And for the first time, that realization frightened her. As the months passed, peace slowly settled over the house. The arguments were gone. The resentment faded. The wounds began to heal. And strangely enough, that was when Cynthia understood something. She no longer belonged there. Not because she was unwanted, because she had finally outgrown the version of herself that needed that life, needed that house, needed Kelvin. One morning she woke before sunrise. The house was quiet. She sat beside the window, watching the sky brighten, and a simple question entered her mind. If nobody needed me, what would I choose? The answer came immediately. Myself. The realization brought tears to her eyes. Not sad tears. Relieved tears. For the first time in her life, she was giving herself permission to exist beyond sacrifice. Over the following weeks, she made plans quietly. She found a small apartment in another city, expanded her catering business, saved every extra naira she earned. And little by little, a future began taking shape. A future that belonged entirely to her. Then one morning she left. The closet was empty. The drawers were empty. Even the books she kept beside the bed were gone. Only a single envelope rested on the pillow. Kelvin found it an hour later. His hands began shaking before he opened it. Inside was a letter. Kelvin, for years, I believed losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was wrong. The worst thing was losing myself. I spent so much of my life carrying other people's pain that I forgot I deserved happiness too. When my father left, I blamed myself. When my mother blamed me, I believed her. When you abandoned me, I thought maybe everyone else could see something broken inside me. But they were wrong. I was never broken. I was simply giving my love to people who didn't know how to value it. Prison taught me how strong I was. Life afterward taught me something even more important. I don't need to earn my worth. I already have it. I stayed because I wanted to make sure you would be okay. Now I know you will be. And it's finally time for me to discover what my life looks like when I'm choosing myself. Thank you for the good memories. Goodbye, Cynthia. By the time Kelvin reached the final line, tears blurred the page. At last, he understood. The greatest loss of his life wasn't his illness. It wasn't Vanessa. It wasn't the money. It was the extraordinary woman who had loved him when he deserved it least. And now she was gone. 1 year later, Cynthia was living in a different city. Her catering business was thriving. Her laughter came easier. Her days felt lighter. The prison years no longer defined her. Neither did the betrayal. Neither did the sacrifices she had made for others. For the first time in her life, she was building something that belonged entirely to her. Some evenings, she would think about the past, about the choices that changed everything, about the people she had loved. But those memories no longer carried the same weight. They were chapters, nothing more. The future stretched out before her, wide open and full of possibility. And as Cynthia locked up her catering shop one evening and stepped into the fading sunlight, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. Because she finally understood something that had taken a lifetime to learn. Her worth had never depended on who stayed. It had never depended on who left. It had been hers all along. And this time, she walked forward without looking back. What would you have done if you were Cynthia? Would you have given Kelvin another chance, or would you have chosen the same path she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories every week. Thank you for watching.